As you probably know already,
Yes, please.
one of the panelists who was supposed to be here with us tonight moved somewhere else, you know. I don't know if you were here for Cardinal Dolan's presentation, but he remembered Officer Stephen McDonald. Officer Stephen McDonald was shot 30 years ago in Central Park and was left paralyzed, quadriplegic, for 30 years. And a few days ago, he passed. We want to remember him and honor him by reading something that he said about what had happened to him. I forgave Shavad because I believe the only thing worse than receiving a bullet in my spine would have been to nurture revenge in my heart. Such an attitude would have extended my injury to my soul, hurting my wife, son, and others even more. It's bad enough that the physical effects are permanent, but at least I can choose to prevent spiritual injury. Again, I have my ups and downs. Some days, when I'm not feeling very well, I can get angry. I get depressed. There have been times when I even felt like killing myself. But I have come to realize that anger is a wasted emotion. Of course, I didn't forgive Shavad right away. It took time. Things have evolved over 14 years. I think about it almost every day. But I can say this: I've never regretted forgiving him. Stephen McDonald. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Riro, and thank you all for joining us for this event titled Never Lose Infinite Hope. My name is Tommaso Bardelli. I'm a PhD candidate at Yale University. I'm really honored to be here tonight with Mr. Dan Giusino, Executive Director of Emerge CT. So let me introduce to you Mr. Giusino very briefly. Mr. Giusino is a national leader in the field of workforce development for the formerly incarcerated. He grew up in East Harlem, so he's a New Yorker. Worked for Strive, the Vera Institute of Justice, and Elm City Youth Build, before founding Emerge in 2009 in New Haven, Connecticut. Emerge, as he will explain us shortly in much greater details, is a social enterprise providing individuals who come home to New Haven from prison with applied skills training, paid work opportunities, and services, which range from education to personal development and much more. Now, to give you a little bit of context of the environment in which Mr. Giusino and others operate and the predicament that they face. So the men and women really who join Emerge every year come from households and neighborhoods that we can say our society has largely forgotten. These are people that, in the eyes of what Pope Francis has called the culture of waste, are superfluous when not nuisance for economic profit. So for the past 30 years, I think we can say, we have lived under an illusion. The illusion is that the prison and the criminal justice system can be used to solve problems that are really generated by what some have called the radical inequality and by the structural exclusion of many from social goods. And as well as, how to be frank, to address our own anxieties about such problems. So I'm not sure this has solved any problem, but has definitely led to rates of incarceration in this country that are unprecedented in human history. There are many data about this. There is one data that I think is striking. The US represents about 4.4% of the world population. We house around between 20 and 25% of the world inmate population. So 1 out of 5 persons in prison anywhere in the world is in prison in the US. So what a tragic example, I think, of the consequences that ensue from a will to control a reality that nonetheless remain elusive, and from the fear that this generates within ourselves. Now, I think because of this tragic context, really the witnesses of many men and women, such as Mr. Giusino, such as Officer Stephen McDonald, become even more important to us. Why? Because I think with their work and example, they do keep alive, first, to us personally, the image of a different way to experience social and personal relationship. A mode of engagement, we can say, with both oneself and with the other that is dominated by hope, as the phrase by Martin Luther King says in the title, and not dominated by fear. Secondly, and as importantly, I think they do keep alive another hope, which is the hope that we can find original, creative solution to urgent social problems in a spirit of solidarity and inclusion, rather than by putting up always new fences. Now, as a resident of New Haven, Connecticut, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to volunteer for Emerge, to become familiar with the work of Dan, the work of his colleagues, and I was even more fortunate to get to know many of the men and women who've passed through Emerge every year. So then, as I told you, coming down here, I am deeply convinced that the experience that you have and that your men have is really relevant for us all. And so I'm really glad, after these 2 minutes, as promised, to give you the floor. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tommaso. I'd like to thank the New York Encounter for this invitation. I'm truly humbled to be here to share my experience. I also like to take this opportunity to express my condolences for the McDonald family, and to Officer Stephen McDonald personally for what a loving example he has been for not just New Yorkers and not just police, but for all of us as human beings. I'm going to piggyback. My name is Dan. I'm the Executive Director of Emerge Connecticut. I'm going to piggyback on some of the comments that Tommaso began with. And the reality for me is that, yes, the United States does have 5% of the world's population, yet incarcerates 20 to 25% of its citizens. In New Haven, where I'm from, so Emerge, born and raised in New York, moved to New Haven in 2000. In New Haven, the situation is similar. So in New Haven, it's a town of about 100,000. There was probably more people in the building I grew up with in New York. But there's 100,000 for folks, and every month, 100 to 125 individuals released from prison are dropped at the town square. So that's the backdrop for the services that we provide. I've worked, as Tommaso had mentioned, about 20 to 25 years in workforce development for former offenders. I gotta say that in the last 8 years, I've learned that I've done so many things wrong. My concept of workforce development for offenders was, if they came home and you got them work, your job was done, you know? So, and for me, and I truly believe this, and I thought this was best practice. In 2009, I had a colleague who decided to challenge me on the kind of modeling that we were doing, and instead asked if I would be interested in traveling around the country and taking a look at what are best practices. Okay? As a result of that, in 2009, Emerge was incorporated. So Emerge is a nonprofit, it's a community-based organization. What's different is that it has this social mission and this business component. We utilize a transitional jobs model with enhanced services as a developmental experience. So we no longer believe that getting somebody a job is enough. But what we did learn was that most offenders coming home, and I work with offenders in New York, in New Jersey, and Connecticut. What we found was that a job was really one of the first things that they looked for. So we looked for an opportunity on how we can leverage that to get them to engage in services that they historically have not wanted to be a part of, but that we knew and best practice and data said would lead to better off measures. So some of those enhanced services, first and foremost, was mandatory literacy classes. So while 75% of the offenders that came into our program had either a high school diploma and or a GED, baseline testing said that less than 30% of them could read at the 10th grade level. So the second enhanced service that we did, and this was contrary to everything I had ever believed in. I believe that the way to make someone successful was, as they came home, get them to work, not get them conditioned to benefits programs in this country. And what we've learned is one of the second and most important things for us as men and women come home is to get them benefits tested, because even if they're not entitled to a large monetary dollar figure, what it does, it creates an incentive for them it creates the opportunity for them to participate in services that most other folks don't get an opportunity to. We have daily readiness training, and the work and the benefit of that is that it's normally in real work experiences. So our real work experiences are in landscaping, demolition. We also work with the Yale School of Forestry and plant all the trees in New Haven, and are currently engaged with some bioswale work, which is green sewers. We also participate and provide the men with this trauma-informed approach to personal wellness. We have weekly fatherhood and parenting classes. And the parenting classes and the fatherhood classes are mandatory for everyone, regardless of whether they have children, because what we've come to find out is that parenting and fatherhood is normally the gateway that the folks that come to our program utilize to get further help. I'll leave it at that for right now. And then there's also always life coaching and a volunteer network that guides crew members through their individual service strategies and connects them to outside services. So in short, what am I trying to say? I say that Emerge uses the ability to put people on payroll so they show up at our door, they believe they need a job. They believe they only think they need a job. And we use that ability to get them to buy in and engage in these other services that they necessarily don't believe they need. But for us, it's really at the heart of their better off measures. So at Emerge, we have a result. And the result is real simple. The result is that the men and women that come to our program have life. So that means they're not killed. Since 2009, we've lost 3 men in New Haven to violence. 2, that they have liberty. And that means that they're not under supervision and aren't reincarcerated. For Emerge, that recidivism rate is about 14.9 compared to the state's 56% over a 2-year period. And third is that they have access to economic self-sustainability. I think the greatest tragedy is of a citizen of this country is to be here and not be able to take part in its economic engines. So 76% of the men and women that come through our program leave us and go on to work at an average salary at about $12 an hour. Emerge believes that the services I have outlined are critical in addressing the chaos and uncertainty that accompanies poverty and unemployment. So for us, who is the candidate who shows up at our door? So 75% of the people that show up at our door have never had a steady job. 79% are reading below the 10th grade level. 92% have been incarcerated. The balance of that 8% of people who are waiting in pretrial, and 87% return to homes with incomes 200% below the federal poverty level. We have communities in New Haven where the average salary for a family on any given block is about $8,000, and yet we wonder why they're not able to make progress. So, in short, what we're trying to do is men show up at Emerge. They all believe we need a job. Most of them show up and they're angry. They're angry for a variety of reasons. And they show up at Emerge, and the goal for us is we have this orientation, which is what we call a wake-up. And it's an opportunity for us to explain to them or to give them an example of where we believe they could be if they're open to accepting change. The challenge for us is how to get them there. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous, so I've got to look at, okay. The difficulty for me on these presentations is that it's easy to spew numbers. But this isn't what this is about. This isn't what this is about. So the hope we have here at Emerge is when people show up at our door, they're broken. And at times we try to be politically correct and call it 1,000 other things. But no one said, I can't wait to grow up so I can spend 15 years incarcerated. No one said, I can't wait to grow up so I can commit crimes. The reality is that most of us didn't come with a handbook, and our parents did the best they could, and we made some poor choices. I'm also an offender. Grew up with parents, had the benefit of parents, and sisters. One who had 3 degrees and her Juris Doctorate, and yet I made poor decisions. I spent the next 20 years, not being able to move forward for the simple reason that I couldn't live up to other standards. And what it does for me and for most offenders is create the sense of uselessness. I'm also grew up really angry for a very long time and lived in denial. The reality was that I'm a survivor of sexual abuse, and yet didn't want anyone to know it because I was more concerned about what you thought of me than what I did, and was absolutely positive that even though the seeds of religion and God had been planted, that he hated me because he would not have allowed this to happen. I am not much different than most of the men and women that show up at our door. So while I promise them a job, what I'm trying to do is build hope. I'm trying to get them to the point that they begin to use this model to first and foremost forgive themselves, second, forgive others, then get over it, and then begin the process of becoming a citizen, to becoming a member of a community. I ask for your forgiveness. This is not a job for me. As I talk about forgiveness, and I try, and I've built a relationship with God, a conversation, Yet every day it still haunts me, because as tough as I thought I was growing up in the streets of East Harlem, the people who I hurt the most are those that love me the most. To this day, I struggle when I think of Mom. And today, while here on the stage with Tommaso, I'd rather be in her lap with my head in her bosom and her telling me that it's gonna be okay. But all my life, my definition, a man will tell me I couldn't say that. It said that I had to be this profile of someone who I did not know. For our men and women, most are the same. So while I tell them they're coming for jobs, the hope for me is that they become comfortable in their own skin and begin to address all the trauma, all the PTSD of growing up in poverty and dysfunctional communities. And to impress upon them the fact that God never put anyone here to live in a cell, and that it's not natural to urinate in a cup to give to a supervising officer. That's just not natural. But that's my hope. And I'm sorry I went over.
Don't worry. You got a standing ovation already. So, I mean, it's hard to come after that, but thank you, Dan, for already, skipping over the numbers, as you say, then, starting really to give us a sense of what is the deep work that Emerge does, and as something that I always noticed, that is a work that is deeply felt by you, and that is inevitably also your life. But I think something that you mentioned that already struck me, and something we talk about again coming in here, is that one of the many things that I observe at Emerge, and they capture my attention and my admiration in the way that you are able to treat these men, is that and women, is that really from the first moment that they come into your door, what starts with them, it is a relationship. It's a relationship that you or others, or other on your staff, or supervisors like Roger, who is here with us today, build with each of them. And something I told you I noticed many times, and I always felt curious and interested about, is that this relationship for you starts with an apology. That the first thing that many times I see you doing with men and women who come and look to be hired is to apologize to them. So I was wondering, maybe you can say something more about this apology. What does this apology imply, and how you came to decide that the relationship should have started with an apology? That would be one of my questions. And why? Why did you think that was so important in this path that then you need to start with these people?
Okay. So as I said earlier, the apology is critical. The apology is critical. Like I said, by the time they get to us, most people, they're broken. I remember in my own personal case, for years I listened, but I couldn't hear. I listened, I tried, because it's painful, but I couldn't hear. because the question was, what's wrong with you? I clearly remember the day that the question changed. And the question changed to what happened. And somehow, that difference was huge. So the apology for me, for the men and women, is to let them know that for some, they're being incarcerated, they're being, in the system, wasn't entirely their fault. They started out behind the 8 ball. The chances of them being successful were difficult. So I do apologize. I apologize for all the parents who weren't there for them. For every teacher who didn't make an investment. For every police officer who abused them. For every employer that didn't take them serious. And for every friend who violated them. This apology is important because it really is the platform for the men and women to begin their own. Socrates said, a life unexamined is not worth living. It's real simple. I need the men and women who show up at my door looking for a job to begin the process of taking a look and beginning the acknowledgement. It's really, the apology leads to the acknowledgement on their behalf that they could have done things different. It leads to their own apology, where at the top of the list should be themselves for what they've put themselves through. But what's wonderful is that it leads to the atonement. Apologies without atonement don't work. Same way rice don't cook itself, neither does pasta. The work requires action. And that sets the paradigm. That sets the paradigm. So it's really, for us, so what are we trying to do? I'm trying to use various vehicles with the men and women who show up at our door for them to have, they came looking for work. I want to change how they think, how they make decisions, what they value, and their behaviors. And what's different about Emerge and other workforce program is that that's where the focus is on skills over here. There's no evidence, I've been in workforce for 30 years, there's no best practice, there's no evidence that a job has ever kept someone out of jail or from making bad decisions. No evidence. But there's a lot of evidence that people who change, who begin to value themselves, who value community, who understand that, begin to understand and create value in themselves, how special they are able to begin to do this work. So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do for folks, when people show up at our door, and I got to tell you, so at Emerge, 2,000 people showed up. 2,000 people showed up over the last 2 years. Of that number, only 257 have been able to get through the program. Because the program's not set up and doesn't help everybody. It's really that slice of people, and I saw some beautiful exhibit upstairs that talked about through the cracks you see the light. But it's really about those that we're able to say, some sense of willingness that we're able to get them to make these changes. So the apology is about an acknowledgement that it's not all their fault, but also the work of beginning the process of getting correct, of cleaning up their side of the street and becoming citizens.
Thank you. And there is something, you mentioned something about it already, but I would like you to explain, everybody here Another feature of the program that immediately struck my attention, so much so that I tried to participate as much as I could, even though it was on a Friday morning at 7 a.m. or something completely unreasonable. And that is called Real Talk, right? So why don't you try to explain everybody? So what it is, what Real Talk is, what it entails from the men. We can ask Rog for help. And then why you say something about the importance of the dialogue, but and the examination of oneself. But why you still believe is such an important part of what you're doing? So, but I don't think we mentioned Real Talk so far. So maybe even just giving them some idea of what Real Talk looks like on Friday morning.
So Real Talk it's a hats-off conversation. It's a real hats-off conversation with the men and women to begin to talk about all those unresolved childhood and life experiences that we put on the shelf, and the shelf has gotten crowded, and they've begun to influence how we behave and think. I'm really proud of the men and women, and I don't think that the men and women of the Defenders of New Haven are any different than happened here in New York and happened in New Jersey when I worked there. But given an opportunity, people just want to be heard. They'll tell you what happened. So Real Talk is this hats-off conversation with men and women, and the importance of Real Talk is that the therapeutic value of men and women who've been in the same situation helping each other is unparalleled. They can say things to one another and hold themselves to a higher standard than I ever could as a program administrator. The importance of being correct, a citizen, 24/7, not for the 8 hours you're at the office, is made paramount. But when I've got men and women sitting around on a Friday morning beginning to have the conversation about forgiveness, about what does a relationship look like, when they begin to challenge each other on what it is, then I'm onto something. Those that set the paradigm, and they set it. When men and women who just came home, who were buffed out from working out in the yard, when they're talking about abuse, when they're talking about being afraid, when they're talking about feelings, I'll take that conversation each and every day. Real Talk is basically just a safe place to have real difficult conversations without being judged, and then being open to getting help and support.
And so let me ask you then about something else that I've seen happening at Real Talk. And you do many times, I did many times as I was there, hear about stories of really unbelievable challenges to be faced. I've heard so many stories of men and women coming back, being unemployed, having an extremely hard time to find a job, often also because of their record and because of the stigma that incarceration carries in this country. Really laying everything, all this out at Real Talk, and I have to say, many times the situation does seem impossible, because everything is staked against them. So, you don't have an income, you do owe money to a system that has mistreated you. And I've seen many times addressing them and telling them, I heard you saying, and I heard you yelling, I believe many times, about the, you don't need to disclose everything that goes on, about the need to stay in the moment. I don't think I'm misquoting you here. I think I heard you saying you need to stay in the moment, you need to stay in the moment. What does that, I don't think this was a prepared question, I'm off there. But what does that communicate? Why do you think staying in the moment, in a situation in which in which really the conditions seem utterly negative. I mean, and many times not for your fault, because you have been punished and you should be fine now. So what's with staying in the moment that you think is important?
Okay, so I'm going to address the comment he brushed over first.
Sorry, Dino?
This work is not easy. What distinguishes emerge from other folks, and it's a personal belief. We're not making widgets, we're not building cars. The decision for me and the staff each and every day, you know, I'm trying to save people's lives. To me, political correctness has been taken to, you know, this unbelievable level. So the yelling that Tommaso referred to briefly is, I'm willing to hurt your feelings if I'm trying to save your life. And normally that's just about holding the mirror up. Being a victim is very seductive. Blaming others, because there's nothing you have to do. And we all know in this room that the work begins with us. So this being in the moment concept is about, and I base this on, like what went on in my life for a long time. You know, I was either ashamed or embarrassed or running from what I did yesterday and or anxious about what was waiting for me tomorrow. And I gotta be honest, the anxiety of some of the men and women that come to our program is real. I'm aware that some of them didn't eat that morning. I'm aware they didn't eat the night before. I'm aware that they don't know where they're going to sleep tonight. Yet that's not enough to keep them from being all they're supposed to be for them. So the being in the moment is really about where are your feet, are you safe? And I personally believe that the moment, I believe each and every one of us can save our lives only in the moment. It's as simple as a decision. Getting the right help. But being in the moment brings me to the reality that I'm here with Tommaso. And that while there's many of you out there, probably none of you are going to beat me. So the reality is we have these fears, these exaggerated fears in our own heads. You know, in my head for a very long time, you know, I was a gangster. Legend, you know, like the Apollo, big marquee. And the reality was, you know, I was a garden variety thug. And I don't mean this disparaging, but a punk who hurt nobody but those that loved him. So if I accept that in the moment, then I can begin the process of healing. Because all this is about is healing. The only time we can change the direction of our lives is in the moment, I believe. It's simple as a decision, supported with action.
And again, I think something else that I found myself wondering, particularly after the first time that I would come to Emerge, is and seeing really this way that you have, this extremely intelligent way that you have of building relationship and of engaging with others. So much so, let me just give a little. So you then gave then came, to give a presentation to a group of Yale undergrads about Ayran AlphaGo, like 50 people in the room. And he gave a similar presentation to the one he's giving today. And at the end of it, people were enthusiastic, and they wrote to you. They reached out to me saying this was the best experience we ever had at the university. So Yale undergrads, people who have all the possibilities. And many told me, I wish I had something like Emerge, to go with, to talk about my problems. And I realized once more how what you do is really desirable for everybody. And so I found myself wondering how did you get here? How did you learn to treat others this way? How did you learn to treat yourself this way? Because I do feel that is something that not only persons who have had to grow up with all the hardship, the poverty and incarceration are particularly in this country, but really all of us many times have an hard time doing that. And so I do wonder how many times who taught you that? How did you?
So I want to tell you that I learned this at school. I attended City College of New York, but the degree is really in pottery. The work I do, the work we do, I like to tell people that I learned at UCLA, not the one in California, but the university in the corner of Lenox Avenue. The work for me, where I learned this is really about nothing more than sharing my experience, strength, and hope. For those of you that know Bill, I'm a friend of Bill. In the process of self-examination through the 12 steps is really the path forward. The benefit of getting a mentor, which is nothing more than, and I don't, some of my men have a problem with names, so I'll call him whatever. We call him a life coach. Find somebody that has something you want and is not, his car and or his house, but that he's, that, and build a relationship, For us, we don't know. And Roger, Roger's a perfect example, and I'm going to introduce him in a second. If we knew how to do it right, we would have got it the first time. We just don't know. But the problem is that we see a grown man, 250 pounds, great physique, and we assume that he knows. He knows, and he doesn't. For me, it's this concept of sharing experience, strength, and hope. It's the benefit of a mentor. But it's also taking a look at and constantly using, on the academic side, best practices and data. It's really being open to saying, I don't know, testing stuff. But the most important thing is working and building a relationship with the men and women that you come with. Roger's going to be very upset with me. He's going to be very upset with me. And I got to ride back with him. So this is difficult. But I'm corny enough, I met Roger 5 years ago. He had just come home from doing a 15-year bid. 15 years. He bought into this. Roger has an enormous street credibility in New Haven. Enormous. But as I built the relationship with him, first and most important was, how can I be of help to him? And it wasn't by teaching him how to drill a nail, how to put up a house, how to remodel. You know, when I asked Raj, why do you come back? Because it's tough at Emerge, it's tough. We have high standards. Not more than they need, but more than they are used to. Other workforce programs want to prepare the world, employers, for them. I think our real responsibility is to provide the child. And for me, that's our participants. I'm gonna, with all due respect, and I don't do things traditional, and I'm not from New York now, so they can't get me, but I'm gonna ask Raj to kind of come up here. Step up here a second.
Let's get the check.
No, you
I got another check, another check.
No, that's. But I'd like to know, the reality is this. Tommaso asked me to come down, give some numbers, talk about the model of the program. I apologize, thank you. Tommaso asked me to come down, talk about program, numbers, best practice. That's all nonsense. I'm gonna be honest. I'm just gonna be candid, it's all nonsense. You know, this is about creating hope, okay? And teaching folks how to love. Not just themselves, but each other. How to be a part of the community. I'm corny enough today that I look forward to see Raj each and every morning. I go to bed anxious, like a child expecting Christmas. Want to make sure that he's there and he's okay. And there's many other Rogers. So I'm going to let you talk about, thank you, sir. What's your experience? Keep an eye on that clock back there.
All right.
Because it's like the count.
What's the question?
You know what?
I'm nervous,
okay,
man.
no, it's okay to be nervous, Papa. I love you.
Nervous.
Papa, I'm you and me. That's it.
All right.
All right. Papa, what's the difference? So, why do you come back? Why do you stay? What has Emerge done for you?
Emerge has helped me make better decisions, take time to think before I, react. Before I came to the program, it used to be if I get into a situation, I just react first and then thought about it later. And it gave me time to really endure patience, be humble, and just have compassion for humankind, man. And just being loving. And I was invited to an orientation from a friend that used to work there before. And after doing a stint in incarceration for 15 years, a lot of doors was being closed in my face. Employers wouldn't give me a shot because I was incarcerated for manslaughter. And it was a big thing to where they'd just look at the application and see prior history and throw it away, shoot it in the trash. And I was invited to an orientation and came to see what the program was about. And I seen that, the staff from the program genuinely cared. And that was somewhere where I wanted to be, like not in the streets, because people didn't really care about you in the streets. They make believe that they care about you, to use you, to get you to do stuff. But it was a genuine love and concern for the men that was coming through the program, and it was family orientated. And it just made me a better person, man, making better decisions and just being able to take time and think.
What I want to say, you know, for Rogers also, that since his time back, you know, his time back, you know, he's a father. Because see, we talk these numbers, but I need to put a face. He's a father, you know, he's a husband, you know, he's a friend. And with Raj, like with most, we're trying to work the process. I'm going to take a liberty here with Raj. Excuse me? Raj lost his mom, his mother while he was incarcerated and wasn't eligible to come and attend. So the pain I see him reflect each and every Friday is this concept of, you know, how does he live with himself? What did he do to her? So it all circles back to this art of forgiveness. And this is why I think the McDonald family is such an example. For me, forgiveness is such a wonderful expression of love. Most people in this room exercise acts of forgiveness. Acts of forgiveness. My challenge to each and every one of you is to develop an attitude of forgiveness, an attitude of love, so that it is unconditional, that you won't judge, Help because they're a human being. Real simple. My job is not to judge. My job is to create a level playing field so that each and every human being or offender that wants to come can get a shot. I'm going to give it back to you.
I mean, I thought since we have the last 5 minutes, unless we can also always ask more to Raj, such a fantastic public speaker. But another thing I meant to ask you, and you touch upon this already some, but about what does the work that you have been doing at the Merge has given to you personally, has given to your life for the past 10 years? What does because I always try to get back to what I hear and I see in the moments that I get to spend at Emerge, and I did see you many times saying in front of the men, but even in other circumstances, I have such a privilege to be able to come here every day, interact with them. I am the one who is really privileged to be here with them. So what form, how did that, and how does that really have changed you and changed your life?
The ironic thing, and not the big secret, is that they do more for me than I do for them. It's real simple. God's grace interrupted my death. He gave me an opportunity to do good. Today, I dedicate myself to try to help others, because Mom's seeds that she planted, they grew. Now, I know that all the pain and suffering I caused my mom, that she's watching, because I'm going to hang with her again. And we're going to have that conversation. So for me, in essence, in short, this is about correcting an opportunity. This is about me getting to do it over. I was a lousy dad, but I tell you, I'm a wonderful grandfather. Like, and also for me and the men, I spoke about a sister who had 3 master's degrees and a Juris Doctorate. Unfortunately, she, like I, having the benefit of 2 parents I'm really never doing without. I never missed a meal. They did the best they could. But she, like I, was very angry. For me, you know, the relationship with my sister, and she passed away 10 years ago. The beauty for me was that I was in recovery, that I was able to show up, that I was able to finally act like a brother. But today, you know, we have other folks that act just like my sister, you know, that I struggle with, that are really difficult. And for me, where I failed with my sister, to me, I believe that when we don't learn things, God has a way of putting them back in front of us again and again and again until we get it right. I gotta be honest with you, because, you know, I got my sister in the new version, the same person, and today, you know, today I can't blame other things. So the work for me and what I get from this each and every day is the opportunity to do right, you know, the opportunity to do right. You know, God's so great. He's never given me what I deserve. Never. It's always been about His grace. I remember leaving New York in 1993. And I'm going to tell you folks, I couldn't dream of the journey He was going to have me go on. So what I want for the men and the women is the opportunity to enjoy the same ride. The opportunity to enjoy the same ride. I treat each one. You know, Tommaso talks about Yale. The reality for me is that he's a gift. And like all relationships, I've come to determine that God determines who walks into your life, but it's on us to determine who stays. And they're not going anywhere. And I thank you.
Thank you.